I mean, for the quarter of a century that we've had the euro, you know, there's been a constant theme of complaint that the euro cannot compete with the dollar. The euro cannot really assume its proper status in the international monetary system without fiscal integration in the eurozone and without sort of a common bond market, and that remains the case. It's often said about the eurozone that or the European Union, that the Union needs a crisis in order to make progress. The most famous example of that, I guess, was in 2012 when Draghi used the financial crisis to kind of generate a boost in confidence about the eurozone's capacity to see its way through the debt crisis. And now you might also argue that the eurozone faces a crisis, the European Union faces a crisis because of the hostility of the Trump administration towards the EU. And I would say, in brackets, that hostility comes from, in my view, the idea that Trump believes that international relations is a game that is played by nation states, that nation states are competing for primacy. And that's what the international system is all about. And I think that if you believe that international relations is a game played by nation states, then the EU, as a kind of supranational entity, is a form of cheating. And I think that that really animates Trump's vision, or Trump's policy towards the EU. So he has a very hostile policy towards the EU. From the historical point of view, you might say, this is paradoxically good news for the European Union, because it gives the European Union precisely the kind of crisis from which historically it emerges stronger. But it might be different this time, because European politics has become so disjointed. Major European countries, France and Germany, obviously, have become so inward-looking in order to resolve their own domestic political crises, that their capacity to use this externally imposed crisis in order to make the union stronger, I think, is going to be very, very constrained when you have parties on the extreme right that have much less enthusiasm for the European Union as an entity than their ancestors did.
So what do you expect from the Eurozone, from the Euro? Some, even fairly rational voices, fear that the future might be in a breakup. We've discussed, the two of us as well, years ago, a possibility of essentially two-speed Eurozone, sort of the breakage into different, smaller currency unions. So what do you see the next 5-10 years to be like?
Difficult to say. I mean, I think anyone looking at the performance of the UK economy outside the Eurozone should, I think, draw the conclusion that leaving the European Union is a big economic mistake. I think it's true to say that the performance of the British economy has been seriously hobbled, seriously badly affected by its absence from the European Union. So, the economic argument in favor of integration remains, I think, as strong as ever. The problem is that the political commitment to that integration is weakening. Whether that leads to breakup, I think, very difficult to say, but maybe a more realistic scenario is that the European Union just becomes a bit more like the UN. The UN is, by most people's understanding, much less relevant as a sort of unifying force than it was in the 1950s, for example, the 1960s. But it hasn't broken up, it hasn't disappeared, it hasn't gone out of existence. It just becomes less relevant. It may be that over the next decade or so, as you get more nationalist governments in office, in Germany perhaps, or in France, in others, that the power of the European Commission is diminished, that the relevance of European institutions becomes less and less visible, but the European Union itself remains intact, but it just becomes less of a force for integration.
And that goes for Euro as well in this picture, in this kind of a scenario.
Yes, I mean, well, I think yes, yeah. The euro as an entity, or the euro as a currency, I think can't really be strengthened, or the role of the euro, the international role of the euro, can't really be strengthened against the background where the European Union itself is becoming less relevant a political force. The more political cohesion there is in the European Union, the more chance there is of the euro as a currency becoming a major international force. So, and the opposite is true by definition.